Hey everyone, I'm Anya Esma, and today we are going to do the No Disclaimers Tarot tag. That's a tag that Katey Flowers started. I think I saw it first when Kelly-Ann Maddox did it like a week ago or so. So we're going to do that today. It's going to be about really getting honest with what I like about the tarot community, what I don't like about it, what I like about the decks that are going around. It's mostly going to be about decks, not so much about the community maybe, but we'll see. So I'll talk about like overrated decks, my least favorite decks, what bothers me about tarot in general, like the current deck landscape, if you want to call it that. And yeah, I do want to say, just like Kelly-Ann mentioned, I am not hugely into collecting tarot decks. I'm like not one of these people who uploads a review every week, who buys a new deck every month. I buy like 1 or 2 tarot decks a year at this point. During my high times, obviously, I bought a lot more. I don't know how many decks I have overall, but counting Oracle decks as well, it's probably between 10 and 20 because I'm very picky with which decks I want. And yeah, so I'm probably not the hugest collector, but I do look at a lot of decks and then don't decide to buy them. So I think I do have a good idea of what's going around at the moment. And that's why I can speak to these things. And it's just a fun tag, so I just want to do that. I'm going to put timestamps down below. So the first question is, what trends and tropes annoy you the most in tarot? And the trends and tropes that annoy me the most in tarot, there are manyfold with the current deck environment. And I think the first one I want to touch on is the Chariot. Now, let's talk about the representation of the Chariot. The Chariot is my birth card. Like if I take my birthday, add everything together, 7 is the result. So it's a card that technically I relate to a lot. I relate to the meaning of it. I relate to, the like go-getter attitude, at least sometimes in my life, like being very convinced of myself and maybe sometimes rolling over others with my little chariot and stuff like that. but I really have probably never seen a representation of the Chariot where I'm like, yes, I love that. And the reason for that is the traditional Chariot cards, I can live with them. It's okay. But I was really hoping that there would be modern decks who have a modern take on it that I find interesting. But there are not, as I am speaking. A very good friend of mine, bless her, she has once put together a full folder of different chariots. And I was thinking of actually making a video about this where I review chariots. And then I realized, like, man, this is just going to be a hater video. I'm just going to hate on all these chariots. So I decided not to do it. And my main issue is I just don't like when they get represented as cars, bicycles, motorbikes, or anything like that, you know? Like in modern decks, that is mostly how they are represented. And I don't vibe with it. I don't vibe with chariots themselves necessarily either, but there's one important thing I really want to draw attention to. One of the things that a chariot is for, or used to be for, we don't really have chariots anymore nowadays, is competition. It is not a carriage, because a lot of people, I think of the chariot as a carriage. It's not. It's a chariot, and it's for competition. You go to a race with a chariot. You don't ride around the city for fun in a chariot. Generally, you don't go get around in it because they're like really fragile things. If you read up on like chariot history, which I haven't done a lot of, but I know they are fragile. They were like literally made for racing and would fall apart if you probably rode in them for longer than, I don't know, a day or something. So it's not like a stable carriage. And that's another point which I realized today why it bothers me that it so often gets represented as a car or a bicycle or a motorcycle. Like, yes, you can race with them, but they are also everyday items that we use to get around, like a carriage. And I feel like it just doesn't convey that meaning unless you literally have a racing car, I guess, like a Formula One racing car, which is also not meant to be taken on a normal street. I think I might even accept that as a representation, but I still wouldn't like it because it's too modern. So basically, I'm dissatisfied with how chariots are represented, like the chariot card, how the chariot card is represented, but I also have no idea how I would do it if I was going to do it better, so I can't really hate on it. Okay, the next thing that annoys me, or that I don't like, is a lot of the time collage decks, especially if they use real photos. I'm just not into it. And I'm not going to give any disclaimers. Obviously, if you like them, it's fine. But for me, it does nothing to look at real people on tarot cards. And most of the time, it is collage decks that utilize real people. There are a few decks that have real people like in a photograph. But on the other hand, I also really don't like realistic 3D decks. You know, those decks that have this 3D CGI look? Hate it. I hate it. I think it's ugly. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't transport me into any sort of fantasy world, which I'm looking for with tarot. It doesn't communicate with my subconscious. It's boring. It's annoying. No, I just don't like it. Personally. It's fine if you've made a deck like that, if you like decks like that. Just saying, it's my personal taste that I don't like decks that have photos of real people or this uber realistic 3D CGI look. Now, another thing I don't like, and I feel like that was kind of a trend recently, is the whole 60s style, like the 60s drawing style like you would see in the zombie tarot, for example, or in the kitchen table tarot book. I don't think there is a kitchen table tarot, it's just the book. So, you know, that kind of style. It also does nothing for me because I think it's like too realistic, and I'm really not looking for realism in my tarot decks. I'm really not. I like the like high fantasy out there tarot decks, but I will talk about that a little bit later in a different question. And another thing that I want to mention is I don't like it when there are just women or female presenting people in a deck, or you can like clearly see that it was designed to exclude men. And I find that really exclusive and kind of mean and unhelpful to just completely exclude men from a tarot deck. I understand maybe why there's an audience for it, and I have decks like that myself. But it still feels like something is missing, you know? It would be the same for me as if I have a tarot deck that only has white people, or only has thin people, or only has able-bodied people. I would feel like something is missing. I'm like, I look at it, I'm like, huh, well, it doesn't really represent reality, you know? And God knows most decks are like that. Like the majority of decks doesn't even have people of color. Nevertheless, if people make like these new inclusive decks and then there's no men in it, it's kind of like, you're kind of not fully inclusive. And I don't want to be like, oh, but what about men? Like poor men getting excluded. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But it kind of is, because like, why would you just exclude a whole gender? If you are trying to be inclusive, cisgender men exist and they are valid too. Oftentimes they are shit, like that's just how it is, like white men. Yeah, but still, it's weird if you don't include them in a tarot deck. So, I don't know. I have like convoluted feelings about it, as you can tell. Okay, let's talk about the second question. Which deck do you feel is overrated? There are two that came to my mind here. I don't want to bash the Wild Unknown Tarot too much. Katey Flowers mentioned it as well. It doesn't do much for her, but it is a very, 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 very hyped deck. I think it was the #1 selling deck on Amazon for a long time. And I like it, but I do think it's overrated. That's the thing. Like, it's a good deck, but it's not #1 on Amazon for 2 straight years kind of deck, you know? So in that sense, I think it's overrated. I don't know if it was actually on #1 for 2 years. Don't quote me on that. And the second deck that came to my mind is the Deviant Moon Tarot, because I just don't like it, and I don't feel like a lot of the cards are really good representations of what the card meanings are. I don't see it. Doesn't do it for me. And I feel like it was quite hyped for a while. Now it's kind of died down. But I mean, I know people who work with it and they say like it's a great deck once you get to know it. And I want to believe that, but I really have no inclination to get to know it. Does nothing. I feel really sassy in this video, and I hope it doesn't come across as me being super dismissing and an asshole, but that's just how I am when I talk about things I don't like, which I don't do often, so I'm kind of enjoying it as we're speaking about it. And I also watched a lot of Mia Soros's channel recently, and that's her whole channel is basically her talking about things she doesn't like and literally yelling in the microphone. So, and being like totally over the top. So maybe I took a little bit of that on. Okay, so #3, what are your least favorite decks you've seen since joining TarotTube? The thing is, if I don't like a deck, I literally forget about it. Like, if I see a deck and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, I want to look at a walkthrough of it, and then I look at a flip through and it gets to card 2 and I absolutely hate it, or it gets to card 5 and I absolutely hate it, I just turn it off and completely forget about the deck. And whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, that's that deck I don't like. So I don't pay any more mind to it. So not a lot came to my mind. But what I do want to say is I don't like the Everyday Witch Tarot. It's cute, I get it. It totally has an audience, but for me, it's too playful for a tarot deck. It has like no magic to me, if you know what I mean. Like no mysticism, nothing fascinating, which is why it's probably called the Everyday Witch Tarot, because it's about everyday life. And as you can probably tell after hearing to me rant for 10 minutes, I'm not really into realism when it comes to tarot decks. A second one I could name is also the Zombie Tarot, but I don't know. I wouldn't say it's my least favorite, you know? But one that always gets me, one that kind of really gets me, is that if you've ever been on AliExpress looking at tarot decks, you will have seen the holographic Rider-Waite-Smith, the cheap ass holographic Rider-Waite-Smith that gets sold by like 100 different sellers on AliExpress. Blech. Whenever I see that, blech. Like I just can't. I think because it's this idea of overconsumption and capitalizing on tarot really bothers me. If this had been a creator who, like, with their lifeblood and their artistic talent had made a holographic Rider-Waite-Smith, I would love it, because I love holographic things. It's awesome. Like, it's an awesome deck idea, but I think just seeing people buy it from AliExpress for like $5, it does something to me where it's like, it's not creative, it's not unique, it's nothing, because it's just cheap. And I think that's why it bothers me. But I do have to say, I've absolutely considered buying it myself, because I do love the idea. Like, holographic Rider-Waite-Smith, hello, I want it, but at the same time, I'm like, no, it's too, I don't know, this whole like capitalist idea of like just making a random deck holographic to get people to buy it for $5. I don't know. It does something to my brain that I don't like. I can't put it into words better. I bet one of you is going to comment and put it into words much better than I can. Question number 4. What is one card that has ruined a deck for you? As I said, as soon as I see a card that I don't like, I just shut down the whole deck and forget about it and delete it from my brain. So I can't really say. I don't buy decks that I don't like when I look through a deck. As soon as I see one I don't like, that's it. So I can't really think of one that was really ruined. There are some cards in the Amenti Oracle that I don't like, but they don't ruin the deck for me. I would say maybe the Druidcraft Tarot, but maybe I just don't like the style. But then there was the Pregnant Empress, which Katey Flowers also talked about. And there's the Magician, and both of them, I look at them and I'm like, nothing. It does nothing for me. So at the end of the day, oh yeah, and the Mary L Tarot, the Hierophant. I know many people hate the Hierophant and the Mary L, and I do know there is a new edition. There's a second edition, maybe even a third by now, I don't know, but I think just a second, where the Hierophant looks different. And I've considered buying it since then, but haven't really, because I think there are other decks in that, other cards in that Mary L deck that bother me, but I'm not quite sure which ones. So number 5, which out of print deck do you wish was still in print? The thing is, I don't collect decks. I don't spend $50 on decks. Like, you know, most of those like indie decks, I have a lot of respect for them. I love the art. I love the idea of indie decks. And I know like at least 2 which I would love to have. There's the True Black Tarot and the Flux Arcana. They are amazing, both of them. Fucking amazing. But I just can't convince myself to spend 50 to 80 euro or dollars on a deck, and then plus shipping, because I live in Europe, so from the US you pay like $25 shipping or something. So they just kind of also get deleted from my mind, where I'm like, I don't want to spend that money, so just forget about it. You're just gonna break your own heart if you keep thinking about them. So if they go out of print, I'm kind of like, yeah, it's sad, but I don't regret not spending $100 on a deck, because it's just not what I do. It's just not what I want to spend that much money on. Now, number 6, what are some of your tarot and TarotTube pet peeves? I feel like the first one kind of answered that with the tropes. But one thing that bothers me a little bit is when people like hate really sexualized tarot decks. For example, what's it called? Goddesses and Sirens Tarot. I can't find it now for some reason, but it's a hugely sexualized deck. And it's kind of this, you know, like 80s fantasy or sci-fi book covers. It's like that a little bit, where it's absolutely hypersexualized and the women are just sexualized, just how it is. But the men are as well. And I don't mind decks like that. Sometimes I like them quite a lot, because I like that whole like perfect fantasy. Like, you know, for example, I know that this is a complaint that Kelly-Ann also mentioned, the whole like, if you have a warrior, like a warrior goddess, like Freya or whoever, and they just wear like a metal bikini or something. I can't be mad at that, because I grew up with video games and with TV shows that were exactly like that. And while I totally question it and know how dumb it is, bitch, you better know I was the first one to wear armor like that in a video game. Like, if there is skimpy armor that makes no logical sense, I would wear it. It's just kind of my aesthetic, I suppose. So I don't mind it, but I also get that other people mind it, and that they're like, man, like, I want to see Freya in full armor, or I want to see, actually, Joan of Arc has a cool representation in the Goddesses and Sirens deck. What is that called? Am I even saying the name right? Sirens and Goddesses, Goddesses and Sirens, whatever. I'll like put a picture here. And Joan of Arc is actually wearing full armor. She's not naked, but nevertheless, I don't mind it. I don't mind that sort of hypersexualization, while I do understand that other people have an issue with it, and it's a totally problematic representation of women and their capabilities, while men are fully dressed in armor, etc. I get it, but I also kind of love it. So another thing that is a pet peeve of mine is when people are really scared of the Crowley tarot, the Thoth tarot, whatever you want to call it. And people are like, oh, he was a bad man. The whole deck is bad and it's evil and it's dark magic and it's a cult and you should be scared of it. It just, I don't know. I feel like not so many people are like that anymore, but it used to be like this, I think. In Germany, I think it was a lot more normalized, the Aleister Crowley deck. And since my mother has used it literally since before I was born, I was super used to the imagery. It never scared me. It was never like a scary thing to me at all. It's more associated with like positive childhood memories. So I think it's kind of silly when people like warn of it and are like, oh, it's evil and don't use it, it curses you or whatever. No, I don't like that. And I think there are still some people that do that. So question number 7, what are some decks that you feel deserve more recognition? And one of them is the Game of Thrones tarot, which I know it's kind of a novelty deck. I know it's a bit gimmicky. I know it has bad cardstock and that bothers some people, but I like it. I think it's a really well-designed deck. The art is solid, the colors are solid, the mood is solid, the atmosphere, the card choices also solid most of the time. I have a whole review on it where I say which cards I didn't like. But for example, the Ten of Swords, brilliant. And you can tell that it was someone who knew tarot and who knew Game of Thrones who made this deck. And I was afraid that it would just be one of the two. Probably someone who knows Game of Thrones and knows nothing about tarot. But no, I feel like they got whoever made this did a really good job and knew what they were doing. So, yep. Another deck that I feel could have more recognition is probably the Mucha tarot, because it's my absolutely favorite tarot of all time. Like, I use that instead of the Rider-Waite-Smith most of the time, because to me it feels like an improved, literally an improved version of the Rider-Waite-Smith, with more motion in the characters, like more direction, energy. Like, you know, in the Rider-Waite-Smith, like all of the kings and queens, they sort of have the same positions, and in the Mucha tarot you have a lot more variation on that, like standing, drawing swords, sitting, holding a sword in front of them. I feel like it's more expressive. It has more solid symbolism than the Rider-Waite-Smith itself. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion, and obviously everyone in that deck is white, so it's not like my favorite deck to use in all cases, but it is my favorite replacement of the Rider-Waite-Smith. And also a third deck I want to mention here that deserves a bit more recognition. I do like Harmony Nice's tarot deck. Do I have it here? No, I do not have it. It's in the other room. It goes a little bit in the Oracle direction. It only has pip cards that bothered a lot of people, but I still like it, and I still sometimes like working with it. And I feel like people were a bit overly disappointed with it. Like, I don't know. I thought it was an okay deck. Now, number 8, what are your thoughts on negative reviews? I don't have much to say on that. I'm totally fine with it, as long as you don't attack the creator and kind of bring it across in a sympathetic way and not just like, this deck is absolute bullshit, it's absolute crap, it's absolute garbage. If you talk like that, I'll be like, okay, calm down a bit. If you talk about a specific deck, that's also why in this video I tried to not talk too much about specific decks, but more styles, even though I did mention some specific decks. But I think I'm making it very clear that the reason I don't like a lot of these decks is just because the style doesn't agree with me. It's just not my aesthetic. It's not what I'm interested in. It's not what turns me on. And I think that's a good enough reason. It's not like, it's nothing personal to the creator. It's nothing personal to the deck itself, probably. It's just the style as a whole. Yeah, because I'm picky. Pretty fucking picky. Oh, I think one more thing I want to say that also bothers me sometimes about the TarotTube community is if there are like literal huge hauls and that's all a channel does. Like no depth to the meaning of the cards or like walkthroughs, but just like hauls or like getting a new deck every week. I just don't think, I think it becomes like kind of a capitalist thing then. I mean, everything is capitalism. You know how it is. But it just becomes a little bit stale and consumerist, I would say. Consumerist is the better word, where it's like, oh, okay, you are just showing decks on your channel and that's it. There's probably a place for it, but I just don't like it that much if that's all the channel is about. And I've been very careful with my channel as well that I don't do too many deck reviews, though I feel like my deck reviews kind of go deep into the cards and I go deep into the symbolism, you know, and it's not just like, here's a new deck and next week, here's another new deck and the week after that, here's another new deck. I try to give it some depth, you know, and I think that's super important with tarot because it's not just something pretty you look at, it's something you use, it's supposed to be a tool. I know for some people it's just art and I get that, but I think there's more to it. Yeah, okay. That is totally it. If you want to do this tag, tell me in the comments, or if you did the tag, tell me in the comments. If you want to do the tag, do it. And thank you so, so much for watching till the end of my rambles. I love you all so much. Thank you for being here. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Like the video, share the video, do whatever you like, and I will see you very, very soon.